of the Arab group demand the Israeli government an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. In Peru, Pedro Castillo said that FMR Prosecutor Patricia Benavides made up a case against him and that after 8 months of investigation, it has not been proven that he was involved. In the United Arab Emirates, 198 countries adopt the final declaration of COP28, agreeing for the first time to move forward with a transition away from the fossil fuel industry and to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll be with the news. Stay with us. After the 68 days and despite international condemnation, Israel continues its total assault on the Gaza Strip. During the day, dozens of civilians were killed after the intense bombardments against homes in Khan Yunis and Al-Darad cities. At least 20 Palestinians were slaughtered early on Wednesday morning, including several children, after Israeli occupation aircraft fired missiles at a residential neighborhood in Khan Yunis, south of the Pacific Gaza Strip. Home attacks were further reported in that route town in Gaza City, bringing about 25 deaths. Palestinians' health ministry updated killing amounts to a death toll to 18,412 people, most of them children and women, while over 50,000 have been injured since October the 7th. At the same time as the shielding of Gaza, the Israeli occupation army continued its aggressions against the city of Jenin in the occupied West Bank for a second consecutive day. The Israeli army caused great destruction after bombing 3 houses in the eastern part of the town with anti-air missiles. Several bulldozers accompanied the military incursion, destroying infrastructure. Furthermore, the residents denounced that soldiers shot at all those who were in the streets while launching a campaign of raids and arrests.
The army stormed the house at night, took down the doors, then placed snipers and started shooting from inside the house. They claim that the owner of the house is a wanted person, but I don't know. I just saw them breaking into the house in an unusual manner.
Israeli media acknowledged on Tuesday that the number of Israeli soldiers killed in the ground offensive in Gaza has risen to 115. According to the Israeli Defense Forces on Tuesday, 10 soldiers of the occupation forces were killed and several were wounded after a series of explosions in a neighborhood of Shehaya in the city of Gaza. On the other hand, the Golani Brigade reports several wounded from Battalion 13 in Kajbat town. And the World Health Organization calls once again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza Strip and urges Israel to allow access to health centers in the territory. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus denounced riots and incursions in a Camel Hada hospital in Gaza after several days of siege. The authority noted that the facility is besieged by the Israeli army, where about 65 patients in need of intensive care units and 45 medical personnel are pinned down. Ghebreyesus points out that the hospital is under operation because of the Israeli blockades. The World Health Organization stressed that health care is protected by international law and that healthcare workers must be respected. Leaders of the Arab group, through a draft resolution, demand the Israeli government an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The Arab and Islamic nations convened an emergency session of the 183 members General Assembly, where they voted for a resolution to put an end to the genocide in Gaza. The organization's spokesman, Riad Mansour, stated that they will not rest until the occupied army complies with the demand.
all of us united behind this draft resolution, and we succeeded in defeating two unfair amendments, and we were able to acquire 153 votes versus 10 votes that voted against the draft resolution. This draft resolution demands an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Let me repeat, demands. The language of demands, it has the power of implementation. It does not call for or urges, it demands.
In this regard, a permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations on the situation in Gaza, Riyad Mansour, points out that the U.S. forces are still on the Israeli side after the attempt of a permanent truce that did not work.
We thought that having pauses for a few days without fighting, then to be renewed, would create an atmosphere and dynamic of a permanent ceasefire. It did not work, which means that the main force, which is the United States of America, was still intact, siding with Israel completely and not being cracked. Now, and even last Friday, and today, it was obvious that this powerful force is beginning to crack, and it is losing support except from a handful of countries that are not that significant.
Let's take a very short break, but remember you can now join us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, where you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. In Peru, Pedro Castillo said that the former prosecutor, Patricia Benavides, invented a heart attack case against him, and that after the 8 months of investigation, it has not been proven that he was involved. During a judicial hearing, Castillo accused Benavides of being the leader of an alleged criminal organization and of supporting his imprisonment and his removal as president by ordering his detention while he was still president of the country and was enjoying a presidential immunity. On the other hand, Castillo's lawyer, Eduardo Pachas, points out that after a year in prison, the prosecutor's office has not been able to prove that there was an incriminating agreement between Castillo and other people.
I am more than a year unjustly detained, unjustly imprisoned. The people who have elected me, more than 9 million Peruvians, to represent them and lead them. However, a whole strategic plan in advance, in collusion, the leader of an alleged criminal organization has been supporting not only my imprisonment, but the one who also planned part of my vacancy. What more proof, Your Honor? What more proof we have? Here I have it at hand, and Peru should know it.
Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Keith Rowley will travel to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to attend the meeting of the President of Guyana and Venezuela following the border dispute between the two countries. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December the 14th, resulted from ongoing discussions and a decision adopted at the Caribbean Emergency Virtual Meeting held on Friday, December the 8th. In this regard, not only the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, but also the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, is scheduled to attend. In Cuba, the 44th edition of the new Latin American Film Festival continues, considered the greatest film event in downtown Havana. This edition of the festival aims to spread work and throughout the Cuban leader Fidel Castro through cinematographic and cultural material. During the day, 3 audiovisual productions were presented in his honor, such as Mexico-Cuba, a fraternal history of delicate honesty, the animated feature film El Pidio Valdez versus Dollar and Cannon, and the documentary Clarity Until the Victory of Ideas, with the presence of outstanding interpreters such as Andy Montañez and Lida Milan. The last cinematographic proposal was shown on the occasion of the 65th anniversary of the founding of this pro-independence publishers house.
I believe that for Puerto Rico and for different parts of the world, Claridad is important because it denounces the cruelty and barbarities that these gringos commit against Puerto Rico, and Claridad is of utmost importance to defend our freedom and our way of thinking.
The history of Claridad had to be collected in some way, and this documentary does it. It is a tribute made by the grandchildren of Juan Mari Bras to the newspaper and to Mari Bras, and to the partner Juan Mari Bras, who is the founder of Claridad. And it is made for young people, so that young people know our history, know the history of the newspaper, and know the history of Puerto Rico, because Claridad reflects the struggles of Puerto Rico.
In Greece, relatives of the victims of the train tragedy demonstrated in front of the parliament of the town of Larissa. The demonstrations took place in St. Tatman Square, where relatives and social organizations reiterated their demand to the causes of the accident that took the life of 57 people, mostly the university students, on February the 28th be revelated. Demonstrators urged parliamentary officials not to cover all photos responsible for the incident. In Spain, the plenary of the Congress approved on Tuesday the consideration of the amnesty bill registered by the Spanish Socialist Worker Parties after the East invested agreements with the Catalan independentistas. The initiative passed its first examination of support with 178 votes in favor of continuing the processing of law. At the request of the Popular Party, the vote was public and carried out by call, so all the deputies stood up to announce their vote out.
We are convinced that the amnesty law is necessary to put an end to the division of the last few years. It is needed to build a common project called Spain, in which we can all be more or less comfortable and find our place. It is political corruption, it is unjustifiable, it goes against coexistence, it is a democratic regression, it is contrary to the separation of powers, and it is a humiliation for the Spanish people.
Let's take our last break, but before we invite you to join us on our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on the screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant new coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. One financial break, don't go away. Welcome back. In the United Arab Emirates, 198 countries adopted the final declaration of COP28, agreeing for the first time to move forward with a transition away from the fossil fuels industry and to limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The declaration calls for deep, rapid, and sustained reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030 and 60% by 2035 in relation to 2018, with the objectives of reaching zero emissions by 2050. Let's review the details of the approved text. It stipulates tripling global renewable energy capacities and doubling the annual rate of improvements in energy efficiency by 2030, accelerating efforts to reduce the use of coal-based energy without mitigation, and accelerating efforts towards zero net emissions energy systems. also move away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a fair, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerate low or zero emissions technologies, and sustainably reduce non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions, particularly methane emissions by 2030. Finally, the reduction of emissions from road transport gas highlights with measures such as the deployment of infrastructure and low or zero emissions vehicles and the gradual elimination of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies as soon as possible. In this context, environmental activists spoke out against the UN climate agreement reached during the COP28 meeting held in the United Arab Emirates.
Morning is a very mixed bag of new text. On the one hand, this is a good sign and signal that the world is finally dealing with fossil fuels after almost 3 decades of refusing to deal with it. But on the other hand, the new text includes cavernous loopholes that will allow for the oil and gas industry to continue.
This is not the first year that lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry have come to a COP. This is not the first year that a COP has been hosted in a major fossil fuel producing country with a president that has interests in that fossil fuel production. However, the fact that the presence of these lobbyists, the position of the president has actually removed the COP as a hiding place for fossil fuel interests. And I think that is significant.
In Australia, tropical cyclone Jasper has intensified to Category 2 and wind gusts of up to 140 kilometers per hour are expected in the far north of Queensland. The cyclone is expected to reach land around 6 p.m. on Wednesday. Alpha meteorologists said that the hurricane force winds are already hitting some towns. In this sense, the disaster management group of the tourist town of Cairns issued an emergency alert and advised residents to take shelter in the most resistant parts of the buildings.
Tropical cyclone Jasper will hit the far north Queensland coast early this afternoon and into this evening. It's expected to make landfall early this afternoon and into this evening. While currently it remains a Category 1, it is still expected to intensify to a Category 2 system and is expected to hit the coast between Hopevale and Cairns. Conditions will grow more intense throughout the day in that part of far north Queensland.
In Panama, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development adopted new restrictions that force ships to use longer and more costly roads. The Panamanian Canal has cyclically suffered water supply problems with arrival of the El Niño phenomenon, which could worsen the situation at the beginning of next year, 2024, for the World Trade Crossing. The administration of the Panama Canal highlighted that a number of ships that can transit each day will be limited to 32 from a maximum of 38 due to the reduction of the water depth. We have come to the end of this news brief, but before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We're pleased to share the newscast and contribute to provide alternative news sources to the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also use us on our socials. We're on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I'm from the South. I'm Ana Marrero. Thank you for watching.